Today we are learning the Jewish people principle. This is a very important principle to understand many important topics in the book of Bereshis, Genesis, and answer many very, very, very powerful questions. So whenever I start my Chumash class, I always start it with an introduction. Ask a question: what kind of book is the Torah? Is the Torah a history book? Is the Torah a law book? Is the Torah a storybook? Is the Torah all of the above? What's the answer?
Everything.
All of the above, right? It contains history, it contains stories, it contains laws. Let me rephrase the question. What's the main point of the Torah? Is it basically a history book, and part of the history is that God gave some laws? Or is it basically a law book, and history is background information for the laws? Is it a history book that contains laws, or a law book that contains history? If you go to the secular schools in Israel, they all teach the Tanakh. What do they tell you? It's a storybook, right? Aesop's Fables, the Arabian Nights, the Bible, right? I once had a professor. He said the Bible is a very truthful book. It's truthful. You can learn a lot of good things from it. It's not true. Don't take it too seriously. Don't get too inspired, right? Like the lady that sent her son to yeshiva because he was going out with a non-Jew. Then he started getting religious. No, that's enough. Don't get too fanatic, right? But anyone who studies the Torah objectively can't help but seeing it as basically a law book, right? What did God give on Sinai? 10 stories or 10 commandments, you know? Another one to change it to the 10 suggestions. You ever hear the 10 suggestions? Commandments is too heavy, like 10 nice things to do if you feel like it. It's still the 10 commandments, right? I'm sure you've heard the bad joke about Moses comes down from the mountain, right? I got good news, I got bad news. You ever hear that one, right? Like the guy comes to his office and his secretary says, "Boss, I got good news, I got bad news. Let me hear the good news first." They call from the doctor's office. You've got 3 days to live. That's the good news, right? What's the bad news? They called 2 days ago. I forgot to tell you, okay? Good news. Got him down to 10. Bad news. Adultery's still in. That's a bad joke. This lady, I was once sitting in a hotel lobby. Then he comes in and says, I bought a mezuzah, and there's no 10 commandments inside. First of all, it's not 10 commandments, it's Shema Yisrael. So you buy a mezuzah, you bought a mezuzah box, now you got to put a mezuzah in it, right? This lady once brought a mezuzah to a rabbi, and it was empty. What's the matter? Well, the instructions were in Hebrew, so I threw them out. The Torah happens to be a very poor history book. Things are not necessarily in chronological order. Events that happened later are written before. There's big gaps in the middle. 10 generations from Adam until Noah. Just list of names. He gave birth to him. He gave birth to him. He gave birth. Nothing important happened in the period over 1,000 years, right? From Noah to Abraham. Again, 10 generations. List of names. We finally come to the star of the show, our father Abraham. Do you know how old Abraham was when the Torah begins talking about him?
75.
75. What happened until then? Nothing important? So we have the Midrash. The Midrash is the oral tradition which fills in a lot of the gaps. But the Torah happens to be a very poor history book. And our tradition is that it's basically a law book. And the stories has background information. And therefore the conclusion is that every story and every detail of every story is coming to teach us a lesson. And we must ask, what lesson is it coming to teach us? Now, when you read a novel, you don't say, why is it these details? Why is it? He's telling you a story, he tells you a lot of details, right? But if it's a story in a law book, it must be there for a purpose, right? Now, right in the beginning of the Torah, the first Rashi asks a question. He brings the Rabbi Yitzchak asks the question. Since the Torah is a law book, not a story book, why does it start from creation? It should start from the first law. What's the first law in the Torah?
Today for you be.
Well, there's many first laws. The first mitzvah given to Adam was Pur Ravu, have children, and Avram and Pris Milah, and Jacob and other. But the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people by Moshe, by God, was chapter 12 of the book of Exodus. This month shall be the first month. We have a lunar calendar, and this is the first month, right? In the land of Egypt, right? So Rashi says it should have started from there. It doesn't mean we wouldn't know all the rest. Why can't we have all the rest in the oral tradition? In the Midrash will tell us the story of creation, and the story of Noah's Ark, and the story of the 10 plagues, and the story of the forefathers. Why can't we have that in the Midrash? Why does that have to be in the written law? The written law is the law book. And Rashi answers, Rabbi Yitzchak says, the reason why it's in the oral law is for the non-Jews. It's for the non-Jews. He quotes a verse in Mishlei. What does it say? The Torah students began from here. Koach ma'asav higid la'amo l'seis lem nachlas goyim. It's a verse in Psalms. The strength of his deeds did he tell the nations in order to give the inheritance to the nations, right? Rashi says the day is going to come when the non-Jews are going to say, you're crooks, you came into the land of Canaan, you stole our land. Joshua stole the land from the Canaanites, right? And we'll tell them, look in the Torah. See, they didn't have access to the oral law, but the written Torah they all had. When they crossed the Jordan River, they wrote in all the languages. Everybody knew the written law, right? The Torah begins with God created the world, right? The world is God's. He's the boss. And Adam sinned, he was exiled from the Garden of Eden. And Cain sinned, he was exiled. Then the generation of the flood, they were destroyed. Generation of the Tower of Babel, they were exiled. And then came Abraham, and God chose Abraham. Why did God choose Abraham? Because Abraham chose God. Famous anti-Semitic saying, how odd of God to choose the Jews, right? Our answer is, not so odd, the Jews chose God. Right? And that's our deed in the land. Now, did it ever happen in the times of Joshua that the Goyim came to Joshua and said, you stole our land, and he said, it says in the Torah, this land is mine, God gave this land to me. And maybe it did, but we have no record of it. We have no record of it, right? But in 1948, when Ben-Gurion, who was not an Orthodox Jew, by the way, came to the League of Nations and asked for a Jewish state in Palestine, what argument did he use? He didn't really have a choice. What else could he have said? We were here 2,000 years ago. That's why there's so big an archaeology in this country, right? Is that a good reason to throw the Arabs out? The American Indians come to throw all the whites out of Manhattan Island. We were here first. But the Arabs were 1,300 years, right? That's not a good reason. We had a Holocaust. We need a homeland. That's not a reason to throw somebody out of their land because we had a homeland. They didn't do it. It's not their fault, right? The only thing you could say was, you're Christians and you're Muslims. You believe in the Bible. It says in the Bible, this land is ours. So, Mr. Ben-Gurion, you don't believe in the Bible. You're right? But you got to be consistent, right? So we say, Mr. Ben-Gurion, is that the only thing he says in the Bible? How about Shabbat? How about kosher? How about tefillin? What would you say about somebody who's a kosherist? He just keeps kosher, nothing else. A Shabbatist, a tefillinist, or a Zionist, right? It's a package deal. It goes together, right? And now comes my second introduction to the Torah. I ask a question. I say, when a person writes a book, what do they write about? Things that interest them and things that don't interest them. What do you say? Things that interest them, right? If it's sports, science, whatever it is, right? We claim this is a book that the Almighty wrote, that God wrote. Let's try to figure out what kind of things interest God, all right? The book begins, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The heaven, billions of stars, galaxies, endless space. And the earth. Did you ever see a picture of planet Earth from outer space? A speck, right? It doesn't even go together. Like someone saying, I went to Paris, I saw the Eiffel Tower, and behind my hotel room is a little doghouse. I mean, it doesn't even go together, right? And the next verse begins, and the earth was. And from that point on, the Torah talks about the earth and not about the heavens. Conclusion, what interests God, the heaven or the earth? The earth. Then we have the 6 days of creation, right? The sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, the grass, the birds, the fish, the animals, the insects, the beetles. You know what beetles are, right? Then he creates one man. Again, what is one man compared to an entire planet Earth? A speck. Yet the rest of the Torah does not talk about the birds or the fish or the trees or the grass. It talks about man. Conclusion, what interests God? Man. Okay, Adam was a great man. He was given a test and he blew it. Right in the beginning of the Torah, we have the basic fundamental principles, the concept of creation, the concept of free will, the concept of reward and punishment. Just in parentheses, what was the sin of Adam? He ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now you can ask a question. What's wrong with knowledge of good and evil? Don't you think it's a positive thing to know the difference between good and bad? Why is it a sin to eat the tree from the tree of knowledge of good? So you say God said don't eat it, okay. But why? What's the logic behind it? Shouldn't you know that there's good and bad? I think the answer is obvious. Good and bad, good and evil is very subjective, right? It was a good lunch. It was a bad lunch. It was a good class. It was a bad class. God once told me, it was a great class. What do you say? I don't know. I was paying attention. It was a great class. A great class, right? Could you think of some other criteria one could base a decision on which is more objective than good and bad? What would it be?
What do you get out of it?
What would be more objective? How about true or false, right? Something could be objectively true and subjectively bad. For example, smoking is dangerous to your health. That's objectively true. For a smoker, it's bad. I heard about a smoker that read that smoking is dangerous to his health. You know what he did? He gave up reading. He gave up smoking, he gave up reading, right? Or the other way around. Something can be objectively false and subjectively good. A drug addict is on a trip and he's floating in Never Ever Land. That's objectively fantasy, but for him it's good. So before Adam ate from the tree, his decision-making process was true or false. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's true, I do it. If it's false, I don't. Once he ate from the tree, is it good? Is it bad? Is it fun? Does it fit in with my lifestyle? Do I enjoy it? Right? Once Rav Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal was giving a lecture to college professors. After 5 minutes, one of them said, Rabbi, I want you to stop talking right now. Why? Because if you keep on talking, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle. And I like my lifestyle. He walked out. So Adam, right, was a great man. After Adam is a list of names. He gave birth to him, he gave birth to him. You know, if you look on page 53 in the art scroll, you have a chronology from Adam until Jacob, right? In order to make this chronology, you have to know how many years they live. The Torah tells us how many years they live, but no more details. It's fast forward. This does not interest God. Till we get to the second portion of the Torah. How does that begin? These are the offspring of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. Chapter 6, right? In the book of, verse 9, in the book of Exodus, of Genesis, right? Noah was a righteous man. And we have an entire portion dealing with Noah. Conclusion, what kind of man interests God? Righteous man, right. And after Noah, again, a list of names. Till we get to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses. And from that point on, the Torah talks exclusively about who? The Jewish people. Jewish people, right? What interests God in this world? The Jewish people. Doesn't mean that he doesn't care about the non-Jews. Of course, God's father of all mankind, right? But the Jewish people are exclusive, and we see how the non-Jews are obsessed with the Jewish people, right? You know, how big is the state of Israel? About the size of New Hampshire, New Jersey, right? How often is Israel on the front page of the New York Times? Almost every day, right? How often is New Hampshire, New Jersey? Not very often. They're obsessed with us, right? So we have a principle called the Jewish people principle, and that explains many questions and the stories in the book of Genesis. So the point is basically that the forefathers and the matriarchs, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, the mothers, were aware of the fact that they're not private citizens, that they have a mission to create a Jewish people. And God told Abram this often, outright, right? Right in chapter 12, Lech Lecha, right? I will make you a great nation, I will bless you, right? You shall be a blessing. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Then we have the bris bein hasarim, the covenant between the parts. That's also in Parshas Lech Lecha, where God tells them that you have there will be slaves in Egypt, right? But your offspring should be like the stars, right? And he tells them very clearly, right, that they will inherit the land, right? And there'll be a holy nation. He knew that. He was aware of that. This explains many very, very difficult parts in the book of Genesis. So let's begin. All right? First example is the Akedah. We have the story of the sacrifice of Isaac. And God appears to Abraham, and he tells him, take your son. I have two sons. Your only son, they're both only sons to their mother, who you love, I love them both, and bring him up for a burnt offering. And that's considered the paramount sacrifice in history, that Abraham was able to sacrifice his son. Now we know that throughout Jewish history, Jews have given their lives and their children's lives, which is a lot harder for God. And they weren't as great as Abraham. And they weren't commanded directly by God as Abraham was. So what's the big thing? Of course Abraham did it. God, he was so great and God commanded it. Of course, what was the big thing? Why was it such a big test? Why was it such a big test? Of course he did it. Right. So the simple answer, of course, is that it put him out of business. See, what was his job, his profession? We call it outreach professional. He was teaching the world about God. The whole world was steeped in idolatry. And idolatry includes human sacrifice. If you go to South America during the times of the Aztecs and the Incas, right? If you wanted rain, what do you do? Take a fair maiden, a flint knife, cut out her heart, and sacrifice it to the rain god. What else did he do? Right? Sure, they felt very bad for the poor fair maiden. What can you do? We need rain. Right. And Avram says, you guys got it all wrong. God doesn't want human sacrifice. You don't have to appease God. He wants hospitality. He wants chesed. He wants kind deeds. That's what he wants. By the way, Avram, where's your son Yitzchak? I sacrificed him. It was a total contradiction to everything he was preaching, right? It put him out of business, right? But much more than that. Abram was aware that Isaac is going to be the future Jewish people, right? That's what made it so difficult, right? God promised him he's going to have a nation that's going to teach the world about God. If there's no Isaac, there's no Jacob, there's no Moses, there's no Maimonides, there's no Rabbi Geller's class, right? There's nothing, right? So he gets up early in the morning, right? You want to kill your son, at least let him oversleep. You have to wake him up at nets and sunrise, right? And he travels for 3 days. You know how hard that is, Think about it for 3 days. You tell a Buddhist, jump into the fire. And he jumps into the fire. Tell him, wait 3 days and jump into the fire. It's a lot harder. Maybe he'll become a Christian. Right? And he comes to the place and he ties his son down. And he takes a knife. He's about to slaughter his son. And the angel appears and says, you passed the test in flying colors. Don't do it. Let me just make a little cut to show I was serious. No, nothing. Right? And then the Torah says he sees a ram that was caught in the thorn bush. The rabbis say this ram was waiting for this moment since the 6 days of creation. And he came running towards them. The Satan put a thorn bush there to make it more difficult, right? One horn was Sinai, one horn is the Mashiach, and everything, the sinews were used for King David's harp, right? So the question is, and after he slaughters the ram, what does it mean? He slaughtered the ram instead of his son. Now, does that make any sense, Mordechai? Does that make any sense, right? You just gave me $1 million in cash. Thank you so much, Mordechai. How can I show my appreciation? You know, I just found the bobby pin on the floor. Right? Will you just take the bobby pin on the floor instead of your $1 million? Does that make any sense? Right? Hashem tells him, slaughter his son, who was born to him at the age of 100, the future Jewish people. All right, ready to slaughter him. Don't slaughter him. Thank you so much, God. You know, I just found the ram here. I didn't even buy it. I just found it over here. Please take this ram instead of my son. Does that make any sense? And after he slaughters the ram, the angel appears a second time and gives him a tremendous blessing, right, second time from heaven. Verse 15 in chapter 22 in Genesis, you have done this thing, you hold back your son, your only son, I shall bless you, increase your offspring like the stars of heaven, like the sand of the sea. Your offspring shall inherit their enemies, right? The nations of the world shall bless themselves by your offspring because you listen to my voice. Hold on 1 minute. When did he pass the test? When he was ready to slaughter his son or when he slaughtered the ram?
When he brought him up.
Forget about the ram. Say there was no ram. Did he pass the test?
God didn't say slaughter him, he said bring him up.
Okay, that's the answer in the end. But when did he pass the test? When he was ready to slaughter his son or when he slaughtered the ram?
He was ready to slaughter his son to begin.
Right, say there was no ram. Did he pass the test? Yes.
Yeah.
So why did he only get the blessing? God says he's ready to slaughter his son, you pass the test. Now he slaughters the ram instead of his son, whatever that means, and then he gets the big blessing. Why did he get the blessing only after the ram? And the commentaries explain when Avram took that ram, in his mind's eye, it was his son Yitzchak. And he cried bitter tears. How can I do this to my only son, the future Jewish people? And he overcame his emotions and said, it's the will of God, no questions asked. And he slaughtered the ram. He said, thank you, God, for taking the ram instead of my son. Then he took the blood of the ram, right? In his mind's eye, it was the blood of Isaac. He cried bitter tears. How can I do this? And he overcame his emotions. It's the will of God. Sprinkle the blood on the altar. Every act he did to the ram in his mind's eye was as if he was doing it to his son. And it was considered by God as if he actually slaughtered him instead of his son, literally. And that's why he got that blessing, right? And that's when a Jew came to Jerusalem in temple times. He brought an animal for a sacrifice, right? Now, did you know that the conservative movement took out of their prayer book every mention of sacrifices? We're not doing that again. We're not going back to that sacrificial cult, you know. In our prayer book, it says Musaf. That's the additional prayer we say on Shabbat and the holidays, Rosh Chodesh. We say, we're really supposed to bring a sacrifice, but we don't have a temple. Rebuild a temple so we can bring it. They took that out. We're not doing that anymore. All right. I've never seen a conservative Haggadah of Passover, because there they have a problem. The whole Haggadah of Passover is based on Yivneh Beis HaBekorav, build the temple so we can bring the Passover sacrifice. You know, when do we say L'Shana Haba B'Yushalayim, next year in Jerusalem? When do we say that? You know, Passover after the Seder and Yom Kippur after Yom Kippur, right? Yeah. No other time. Why only those 2 times? What's the common denominator between Passover and Yom Kippur? Because all the other holidays you can have without a temple. We can have a sukkah, we can have a shofar, we can have a lulav, right? But the main point of Yom Kippur was the high priest going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. We don't have that today. Next year in Yerushalayim we can have it. The main point of Passover is the Passover sacrifice, which you don't have today. Next year in Yerushalayim, you want to have the sacrifice, right? When a Jew came to Jerusalem and brought an animal, he would put his weight on the animal and say, this animal should be instead of me. And when he saw the blood of the animal being slaughtered, that should be my blood, and the fat, that should be my fat. It made a tremendous emotional impact. You were a changed person after bringing a sacrifice, right? That was the idea, instead of the arm. So Abraham knew that he had to make a great nation, and that was the test. The test was do God's will. Let's carry on another example. Jacob, right, is running away from his brother Esau, and his father tells him, go find a wife. Go to Haran and marry the daughters of Lavan. On his way to go to his father's, the rabbis tell us there's a 14-year gap in the calculations. He went to study in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. Shem was the son of Noah, and Aver was a grandson. They had a tradition, even though it was before the Torah was given, but they had traditions handed down from Adam, from Noah, right? And he studied Torah for 14 years. He didn't lie down in bed 14 years. He fell asleep on the shtender. And when he lied down, he had the dream of the ladder. It was the first time he lied down in 14. Why is he going 14 years to study? He has to go get married. He's in his 60s already, right? Then he comes to love. He's already in his 70s, right? 7 years I'll work for Rachel, your younger daughter. That was in the 7 years was Love's idea. But the first year, Why 7 years? Don't you got married already? And the answer is, he knew he was making the first totally Jewish family. Abraham had a Yishmael that was no good. Yitzchak had an Esav. Jacob was going to have 12 tribes, and he felt he wasn't ready. He was preparing himself for 14 years of Torah study to be able to do that job, the responsibility of making a Jewish people. He needed, when you're a shepherd, you have a lot of free time. When the sheep are grazing, you can study. He wanted to review the 7 years, the 14 years that he studied, right? He felt he wasn't ready. That explains another question. It says, the 7 years that he worked with Rachel was like a few days out of his love for her. That's what the verse says. That doesn't make any sense. When you're anticipating an event to come up, a wedding, right? A vacation, right? How does time fly? Fast or slow?
Fast.
It's very slow. When is it going to be already? Very slow, right? So how come the 7 years like a few days? It should have been like 10 years, like 100 years, right? But when you're waiting for an exam's coming up, how does time fly?
Too fast.
Very fast. The exam's next week. Oh no, it's tomorrow. Oh no, it's today, right? These 7 years, he was preparing himself to make the Jewish people principle. That's why he went like a few days, right? And then he gets married, he has 4 wives, and there's competition over how many babies, right? And Rachel says, I don't have a baby, I'm dead. Is that a way to talk, If you can't have children, there were great people that, Chazon Ish didn't have any children, Sarah Shanera, the founder of the Beis Yaakov, didn't have any children. You can still accomplish a lot without children, right? But I want to be part of the Jewish people, right? So she gave her maidservant. Her child is subservient to me, Avachar part, right? And Leah has 4 children. She gives her maidservant. She has 4 children already. Every child is a tribe of Israel, right? They were aware of that. That was the competition. Who's going to have a greater portion? And then Rachel's on her deathbed, right? And the midwife says, don't worry, Rachel, you have a son. What do you mean, don't worry? She's dying. What do you mean, don't worry? Because the most important thing was, I want to be part of the Jewish people, another tribe of Israel. See that? That's the principle over here, right?
What is the principle?
The Jewish people principle, that they were aware of the fact that they weren't private citizens, that they were making a Jewish people. Abraham knew if he slaughters Isaac, there's no more Jewish people, right? Jacob was preparing himself to make a Jewish people. The mothers were aware every baby that's born is a tribe of Israel. Let's continue. We have the story of Tamar and Yehuda, right? So Yehuda marries his 2 sons and they both die. And Tamar, he's afraid to give him her 3rd son, and she disguises herself as a prostitute, right? And she gets pregnant from her father-in-law. This was considered Yibum. Yibum is levirate marriage. Today with levirate marriage, the Torah says for only a brother, but before the Torah was given, it was performed by any relative, including the father, right? But what was her motivation? What did Tamar do this for? She wanted to be part of the Jewish people. She knew that having a child from Yehuda will be part of the Jewish people. That was her motivation. And that's why the Torah just imposes this story right on top of the story of Joseph and the wife of Potiphar. And the rabbis say, what was the wife of Potiphar? What was her motivation, right? She wanted to be part of the Jewish people too. She saw on the stars that she's going to marry Joseph and be part of the Jewish people, right? Because stargazing is very hazy. Prophecy is crystal clear, right? Like, for example, the stargazers told Pharaoh that the savior of the Jews being born and his downfall will be with water. So they drowned all the babies in the river, right? His downfall was he hit the rock. That was the one. They didn't see clearly, right? Gene Dixon, they can predict things very hazily, very vaguely, but not clearly, right? What she really saw was that her daughter, Asnas, some say she was her adopted daughter, married Joseph later on. But what was her motivation? Again, she wanted to be part of the Jewish people. Right? That's why those two things, again, the Jewish people principle. Right? And then we get to the story of Joseph. Right? Story of Joseph. And the brothers, plotting to murder their brother, God forbid. Prior to being Jewish, our ancestors wanted to kill their brother. That's not a very nice thing to do. Right? God forbid. They convened the court of law, right? And they decided Joseph is trying to get us, right? His dreams aren't prophecies. That's what he's thinking about all day. He's thinking about us bowing down to him all day, right? He's telling the father bad things about us, so the father should curse us. The curse of Jacob was very lethal. He cursed Rachel, not knowing that she stole the idol, and she died because of that, right? He wants the father should curse us. Abraham had a Yishmael, and Yitzchak had a Esav. Get rid of the brothers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. That's what the brothers thought was Joseph's goal. And therefore they wanted to get him, right? And Jacob is crying. For 22 years he refuses to be consoled. Is that the Jewish way? We're supposed to, in the non-Jewish world, when somebody close dies, there's usually one of 2 reactions. One reaction is, take a trip to Bermuda. Don't think about death. It's too morbid, right? The other reaction is, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. And the Torah says they're both wrong. When someone close dies, you have to sit shiva, sit on the floor, you tear your garment, and you don't wear shoes, and you cry for a week, and you deal with it. Then for 3 more weeks, you limit your activities. For a parent, an entire year, you don't go to weddings, listen to music, right? And gradually you get it out of your system. And then once a year, as a yortzeit, you remember that person. What's his wife for 22 years? He refused to be comforted. And the answer is Jacob wasn't crying only about his son. He had a mission to make a Jewish people with 12 tribes. And he knew that. And one is missing. That means I missed the boat. That means I did not accomplish my mission in this world. For that, he could never be consoled. And then when he finds out that Joseph's still alive, right? What does he say? Now I'm ready to die. He didn't die for another 17 years after that, right? I'm ready to die because now I know I fulfilled my mission. The fact that the forefathers and the mothers were aware of the fact, right, that they have to make a Jewish people, and the Jewish people have to make an impact in the world. You can't have a world without the Jewish people. You can't have a world without the Jewish people. That's the problem, right? And then the Goyim know that. They know that. That's why they're so obsessed about us, because they know the Jewish people, we're a nation that's supposed to teach the world about God. By example, all right? Right? We're not supposed to make a jihad and convert everybody to Judaism. That's not our goal. By example, imagine if there was no crime in the state of Israel. There were no drugs in the state of Israel, right? Well, the nation would say, learn a lesson, right? Look in the religious neighborhoods, right? You ever been to Mea Sharim? You know, it's a poverty neighborhood, right? They live with 10 kids in 2 rooms sometimes, all right? Mm-hmm. What's compared to any poverty neighbor in the world, right? What's the violent crime rate? What's the drug use? Wife abuse, tribe abuse. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfectly Yeshiva there. They never used to lock their doors there until people came outside and started stealing. Right? This is the Jewish people have to be a light into the nations. We have to teach the world by example, right? Mm-hmm. And we have taught the world, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Be proud of being Jewish. Sit back for a minute and be proud of being Jewish, right? Mm-hmm. We taught the world morals and ethics, right? Right? A Roman soldier is about to enter a city, to pillage, to rape, to murder, to loot. And you stop, hold on, buddy, 1 minute. I want to ask you one question. What right do you have, philosophically speaking, right, to go into that city, pillage, rape, murder, loot? What would you say before you chopped your head off? You know, any Roman philosophy, what do you say? Very simple. I'm stronger. Might makes right. And if might makes right, and you have the might, then right or wrong, you're always right. Right? Wrong. That's what they believe. You know? If it's a Camelot, if might makes right and you have the right, then right. Who taught the world that might does not make right? Right? That right makes might. Was it the Romans? Was it the Greeks? Was it the Persians? Was it Jews? We taught the world morals and ethics, right? In the Western world, the slogans, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Our Torah, our prophets, right? All men are created equal. That's a Jewish concept, you know? They even give us credit once in a while. You know, the United Nations is not known to be very pro-Israel. That's the understatement of the year. Right. But do you ever hear of the Isaiah Wall? You know what the Isaiah Wall is? The United Nations Wall is called the Isaiah Wall. They will beat their swords into plowshares. No more war. Our boys, our prophets, we taught the world morals and ethics. Our biggest competitors are imitators. The Christian missionaries go around the world saying, God loves you. Who taught them? The world? We taught them that, right? We taught the world, so you have to be proud of being Jewish. Right? This is the Jewish people principle, right? So the book of Exodus, the forefathers and the mothers, they planted the seed for the future Jewish people, right? The Ramban says there's a famous, very important principle throughout the book of Genesis, Maseh avos siman labanim. The deeds of the forefathers is a symbol, is a sign for the future, right? For example, Abram is in the land of Israel, and there's a famine. He goes down to Egypt. The Egyptians make him trouble. They take his wife. So God brings plagues on Pharaoh, and he leaves Egypt with a lot of money. Does that sound familiar? Right? What happened later on in the times of Jacob? There's a famine, and he goes down to Egypt. The Egyptians make us slaves. God brings plagues, and we go out with a lot of money, right? Whatever the forefathers were doing with their deeds, they were planting the seed for the future Jewish people. That's the fundamental principle of the book of Genesis. When we come to the book of Shemos, the seed grows. Starting off as slaves in Egypt, right? Who's the first one that calls us a nation? You know the first one? Pharaoh. The nation, the children, we were just a family. We're a nation, right? The 10 plagues, the splitting of the Red Sea, and the pinnacle is the revelation on Sinai. We become a nation, and we're supposed to be a light into the whole world, all mankind. That's the Jewish people principle. Any questions? I have a question.
All right, so going back to the cicada thing. So I've heard people, Jews, who don't go to synagogue that often, but when they do go and they're reading the Siddur and they go to the Akedah and they read this story about Abraham sacrificing Isaac. And they say, this is what we stand for? That some guy blindly goes and is going to sacrifice his son? This is my ideal that I need to live up to? This is crazy. This guy's hearing voices and...
So the question that we asked was that throughout history, Jews have given their lives for God, right? Where'd they get it from? You know where they got it from? It's in the genes from Abraham. I'll tell you a story. In one of the concentration camps, one of the commandants decided that too many of the boys were lying about their age. They were saying they were 18 when they really weren't. So he put a stick at a certain height, made all the boys from the camp go into that stick. Whoever didn't reach it was going to be killed. Stepped on tiptoes, we were shot on the spot. They had about 100 boys locked up in the room. The next day was Rosh Hashanah. They were going to kill them all the next day. Now the Nazis, you can't bribe. But the capos, the police, the camp police, right? People had smuggled in dollars and gold and silver. You could bribe them and get your son out. But before they would let your son out, the first thing they took the first boy they found and put him in. They had to have the right number, otherwise they'd be in trouble, right? A Hungarian Jew goes to the rabbi. There was one rabbi in the camp. Rabbi, my entire family was killed. I have one son left, and he's in that room. And my relatives gave me money. I can bribe them, get them out. But I know they're going to take an innocent boy in this place. What does the Torah say? Am I allowed to take save my only son? And the rabbi said, what? You're asking me a question of life and death when I'm starving to death in a concentration camp? I have no books to consult. I have no college to consult. I can't answer your question. Do whatever you want. And the man says, Rabbi, you're the only rabbi here. I have to know, am I allowed to save my son or not? He refused to answer him. An entire hour, he's begging the rabbi. An entire hour, the rabbi's refusing, do whatever you want. At the end of the hour, he says, Rabbi, if it would have been permitted, you would have told me, right? I understand from your reply that it's not permitted. I'm not going to do it. Father Abraham, you were commanded to sacrifice your son. In the end, you didn't sacrifice him. I'm ready to give my son. Right? And the next day was Rosh Hashanah, and the boys wanted to hear the shofar blown before they died. Right? And they smuggled in a shofar, and the rabbi went in. They said, if they come in, you're going to go with them. And they heard the shofar, and they were all killed. The rabbi told the story after the war. I mean, that's the Jewish law. If someone's coming to kill you, you kill him first. Someone tells you, kill an innocent person or I'll kill you, you have no right to. Who says your blood's more red than his? Maybe his blood is more red than yours, right? Throughout our history, Jews have given their lives for God. The Inquisitions, the Crusades, they would commit suicide. They would, rather than have their children be forcibly converted to Christianity, right? Where'd that come from? It came from the genes of our father Abraham. He started it off, right? In fact, that this must so in all the generations, it was a personal thing, right? The Jewish people will survive. I might die, my children might die, but the Jewish people will survive, right? I'm ready to give my life for God, right? But with Abraham, it was much more difficult because Isaac was the Jewish people, right? Killing Isaac means killing everyone, right? That's what made the test so enormous. And he was able to stand. That's why that is a merit for all generations. Okay? Thank you very much.